Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our tactical breakdown series, our show in which we look at the players that have been linked to Arsenal in a statistical and analytical way with the help of some expert insight. This is, of course, our first proper transfer target tactical breakdown of the 2022 summer transfer window. Thank you for joining me. We're doing these live now rather than previously in previous summers where we've done kind of pre-recorded ones because I want to make them more engaging, more interacting with you guys. So we've put in the effort to try and make them into live shows for you. So thank you so much for tuning in. Do drop a like on the video. And of course, if you are new to the channel and you're not subscribed already, please do consider subscribing because you'll be getting continuous updates of all of Arsenal's latest transfer news and breakdowns like this on all of the players that are linked to Arsenal. Yes, I've got a lot of work ahead of me. But without further ado, we're here to talk about Victor Osimhen, the Nigerian striker for Napoli. And to kick off these videos, what we like to do is bring in an expert. And I'm very happy to have the expertise of Rich Hall, who is a writer of Italian, an expert of Italian football, does work for Inter Milan, and Fiorentina, of course, has the Gentleman Ultra, which is associated with The Guardian, and does plenty more around Italian football as well. He knows plenty about Osimhen and plenty about Napoli as well. So he's going to give you a breakdown about his thoughts around the player and, of course, a wider context to the deal as well. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Rich Hall.
Hi guys, back again talking to Serie A. Sorry about the bad light if you see it there. I'll try and keep in where I am, and the curtains there are very Italian, so just let's forget those. Yeah, Victor Osimhen. I know you guys have been linked with him a lot. Let's talk about the possibility of this happening. It is possible because Luciano Spalletti's done a very, very good job with Napoli because they are in a major transition, and this isn't a transition where people talk about it in a normal sense of, oh, this is over 1 or 2 years, and oh, look at Manchester United, they need to move it this year. No. You don't get that with Napoli because there's too much pressure, and the pressure is that you need to keep the best players, and those best players might not be the obvious ones, and sometimes clubs like that have to sell 1 or 2. So when you look at this situation at the moment, Callejon, you remember some of the great forward lines with Dries Mertens, Callejon, Lorenzo Insigne. That's probably the most recent one. I could go back and back. I won't do Desert Light again, sorry. But when you look at it, Callejon's gone. He's at Fiorentina and he's too old. Was he 36 now, 35? It's no good. There's no point. Dries is one of my favourite players in Italy still, at the ripe old age or whatever he is now. Then they've got Battaglia, who comes in and barrel-chested striker. Yeah, he's not Napoli standards, but he's a decent guy off the bench. And then you've got Lorenzo Insigne, and where's he gone? Why have Napoli done this? Why didn't they spend the money on his contract? Because he's one of the most exciting players in Serie A at 30 odd, and only just. And look what he did in Euro 2020. But that wasn't in 2020. Just gotta say. But he's still amazing, absolutely brilliant. So yeah, really, really difficult because they got obviously Osimhen in to change this, and they've got a lot of work to do. The thing is, you're going to spend a lot of money on him because they brought him in for a lot of money. Look at the price he came in for Lille. What was that, 60 million euros, 70 million euros? It's a ridiculous price. They were going all for broke. Has it worked for them? Potentially it has, but he's had a shoulder injury, and people will always say to you about Osimhen, oh yeah, he's been injured. Irrelevant. No, it's a shoulder injury and it's fine. It will be okay because he's still a player that's yes, he's physical, he's fast, and he can head the ball and everything else. I don't want to do the obvious comparison. Let's talk about Italian media, not me. The Italian media compare him to a raw George Weah. Not okay with that, but it's still, I get it in a way because he's quick, he can head the ball, he likes to run at defenders. But when you look at George Weah, when he was probably best for Milan was about 2 or 3 seasons after he joined. Everyone remembers that goal against Hellas where he just ran at defenders, and Victor Osimhen loves to run at defenders. My comparison to him would be a more recent player, Rafael Leao, and we've just seen him win the Scudetto with Milan. And the interesting thing about him is because he's changed his game. He doesn't just run into blind alleys, he makes the right runs. Now, I'm struggling to judge Osimhen because he's just had Lorenzo Insigne inside him, and he's one of my favourite players in Serie A. Hence why I'm so disgusted that he's gone to MLS. And I'm not got a problem with MLS at all. I just don't understand why a player playing one of the top 4 European leagues would go to somewhere else when you are at the top of your game. And I think the MLS is a great league, and look at what Giovinco did when he was there. And look, big Italian community in Toronto, different video. So I don't know. For the money you'd have to pay for him, and I know there's talk of smaller. I don't see the fact that you'll get him on a small fee. I think it would have to be 60 upwards, and I think then Napoli hit a loss, and they've got a team to rebuild. Koulibaly's not getting any older. You will all remember certain Ospina, who's actually been okay, to be fair to him, competing with Meret, who's younger in goal. Lots of different issues, so the Napoli situation is very complex, but when wouldn't it be in Naples? So my thing would be just be careful what you ask for, because you spent a lot of money from another guy from Lille, I think you did. Now, I think Osimhen's a bit more mature than that and a bit more direct. He's got a better scoring level. He's more confident in front of goal, and he's not had to play in the wide spaces. He's a direct forward striker. End of story. You don't put him out wide. You put him out wide, you're mad. So I don't know. Maybe someone like Pepe would bring the best out of him, which is a whole different thing. But what I'm saying is, you're going to pay money for him because Napoli needs to rebuild their squad. So I hope it works. Genuinely hope it works. I wouldn't be on here every other month. Damn that lights. If I wasn't a big, advocate of and follower of Arsenal, even though my Italian allegiances lie somewhere north of Milan. Well, not north, just Milan. Into that is. But yeah, listen, it's one of the hardest ones I've had to do on here, because I think that it is a gamble, because you will spend the money, and he's got the potential to be one of the world's best strikers, yes, but don't just take that as it's going to be like that. So anyway, I've overshot this video for timings, so sorry, Tom, and I hope you guys do well in the summer, but it's a tricky one, this one.
Big thank you to Rich. He got there in the end, didn't he? So really good insight from Rich there about Victor Osimhen, of course, giving you a bit of a wider context about Napoli as well and their situation too. We're going to go into some of the finer details and the statistics surrounding Osimhen now. So without further ado, let's get them onto the screen to kind of give you a wider context. Now, in previous summers, what we've done in these types of videos is we've gone kind of long form. We've looked across lots of different metrics and things like that. What I want to do is I want to condense this down and make it more simplistic, and I think actually tackle some of the more key things. We're still going to be looking at the comparisons, and we're going to get that up in a second. But I just want to see how, in more of a broader spectrum, of where he really shines in the context of other forwards and where he shines in regards to other players across the whole of Europe. So if we look at his FBref profile in terms of non-penalty goals, non-penalty XG, he is up there in the higher echelons of strikers on the planet right now. Same with shot taking, same with non-penalty XG and XA, really strong there. But he isn't, a wildly creative striker. In fact, when you look at kind of the number of passes he attempts during games, they're very low. When you look at the number of assists he gets throughout the season, again, very low. But he stands out in terms of his touches in the penalty area, in terms of the progressive plays that he makes, and also in terms of the way that he carries the ball. He stands out in those areas. But in terms of being a raw number 9, he is exactly what Arsenal would need in that specific area. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he would do if he was to come to Arsenal. Now, let's make some comparisons. Now, of course, we need to compare him with a player at Arsenal that is most likely to be in the striking position next season. And Eddie Nketiah certainly is that player. So we're going to compare him to him. Gabriel Jesus looks to be the number 1 main striking option for Arsenal this summer. So we're going to be comparing some statistics with him as well. And Jonathan David, we're going to add plenty more with him in this wrap of players as well. Let's start off by looking at their heat maps. Now, the main thing that you notice about Osimhen compared to the others is kind of how direct he is and how focused he is on being in and around the 16-yard box, whereas you look at someone like Jesus, not necessarily as akin to that, and has played out wide for Manchester City significantly more. You look at Jonathan David, another player that's played in a striking pair along with Burak Yilmaz, and when he does that, obviously he drifts kind of to the wide left and to the wide right. And Eddie Nketiah, whilst he's not got as an intense heat map because he hasn't played as many games, of course, as the others this season, he likes to spend time in the box, but also similar to Jonathan David's positioning, can drop in, can play out wide, can skew his positioning as well. But Osimhen, if you want a guy that's going to be in the box and around there and taking shots in the box, Osimhen is your guy. Now, looking at XG, now, if you are a little bit of an XG virgin, if you will, and you're not too in the know about what XG is, XG basically stands for expected goals. It is basically a calculation that looks at all of the shots that have been taken across the season and how many of those shots should have come in as goals. So across the season for Osimhen, for example, he should have got 11.5. I've got those the wrong way around, which is really frustrating. So it should be goals and XG the other way around, hence why you can't have 14.15 goals. That would be silly. I will change that around for you. But in terms of Osimhen, he's outperforming, his XG there. He's got 14 goals to 11.5 in terms of XG, which is very good, very strong. Very much appreciate him getting that high. And it does show that he's kind of one of those strikers that outperforms what he's expected to, which is really good. You compare that to Eddie Nketiah, who's also outperforming his XG, but not as considerably. 5 goals from a 4.6 expected XG. Jonathan David also outperforming his XG, 15 goals to 14.1. And then you've got Gabriel Jesus, who at the moment isn't. And this is kind of the big question around Gabriel Jesus. And of course, when we do our tactical breakdown in a day or two on him, that is going to be the focus of a lot of the discussion is he good enough? Is he clinical enough in the box? Osimhen is. And you see that with the 14 goals that he's got to the 11.5 XG expected of him. If we look at their shooting, what's interesting about this is despite him being very clinical, he's got the lowest shot accuracy of all the players in our graphic here, 33.3% according to Wisecout, compared to players like Jonathan David, who's got a 51.6% shot accuracy across the season. When you look at the way the shots are taken, if you look at the graphics there, his goals are coming from very close to the 6-yard box. If you get the ball to him in that area, he is lethal. The issue I feel with someone like Osimhen is if you aren't creating those very specific types of chances, you aren't necessarily going to get the goals from him. And so for that reason, when you consider the fact that you need Arsenal to be creating a multitude of chances, and if you come up a team that are very stubborn and not allow you into one area of the box, teams, as we know, like Burnley, who won't be in the Premier League next season, of course, but there are plenty of games in which you can't find yourself getting into the box, into those key areas, because the opposition are very stubborn. You do need more of a variation in the goal scoring ability. That's where a player like Jesus comes in, or certainly a player like Jonathan David, or even Eddie Nketiah, who has the ability, as you've seen with one of his goals from just outside the box this season, has that ability as well. But Osimhen, very specific, very controlled, very, very concentrated area of where his goals have come from. Now, if we have a look at his assists and the XG as well for those, or XA rather, I'm really having a mare today in terms of some of this stuff. There we go, XA. Expected assists, very similar to expected goals. The number of assists a player would be expected to have based upon the cross that they've made, the chance they've set up for the player. Could they have played a better pass into the player? Osimhen, not the most creative, 2 assists this season, 1.8 expected. He is outperforming that. Eddie Nketiah only 1 to 1.4. Jonathan David, typically thought of as a player as quite creative and link-up play. No assists, 3.2 XA so far this season. That's a little bit of a concern in Jonathan David's court. But Gabriel Jesus, this is where he shines. In terms of link-up, in terms of what he does for the other players around him, he is brilliant. 8 assists so far this season with 5.4. That's what's really important about Gabriel Jesus. If he can improve how clinical he is, he's going to be key. But enough about him, because we're going to do his own video on him. Victor Osimhen, focusing on him, he is your finisher. He's not the guy that you want to be setting up chances. Well, you might want him to, but he's not going to necessarily do that. He is a finisher. He is a classic number 9. He is a poacher, and you're not going to see the necessary assists as you might see from other players that play in his position. Now we have a look at how good they are in the air. Osimhen clearly comes out on top, unsurprisingly so. He's got the bigger frame, the taller frame, and comes out with 41.2% success rate per 90 of his aerial duels. He's getting involved in more aerial duels as well, 5.65 per game in comparison to players like Nketiah, who actually has the second highest, which is quite impressive actually considering his stature. Gabriel Jesus, unsurprisingly, has the least, with Jonathan David coming out at 3.07. But Nketiah has the lowest. And I think this is one of the areas that we all want to see Arsenal improve on this season, which is his aerial threat, Arsenal's aerial threat, and improving how good we are when we put those balls into the box to the strikers. It's all well and good having Gabriel coming up for corners, but he can't be on the end of crosses on counter-attacks or just on sustained areas of pressure. We need someone in the box who's going to be a threat, and Osimhen certainly would bring you that. Finally, looking at the players' dribbles, how good they are on the ball. Osimhen still very good as a striker, completing 52.3% of his dribbles. But in this bracket here, Jonathan David and Gabriel Jesus coming out slightly better with their success rate. But Jesus in particular loves to be on the ball, run at the opposition defence, try and make problems for the opposition. He's going to give you that. As we've said, Osimhen, whilst has got on the lower end of the spectrum, not as low as Jonathan David, he's more of your poacher. He's more of your player that's going to be getting on the end of chances rather than driving the ball into the box to try and create them. And I think that's shown in what we've looked at today. And that completes all of the, the associated statistics and breakdown that we've got for you, which is meaning it's time to go into the chat box and looking at some of your reaction and comments to what we've discussed today. So if you've got any questions or specific comments around Victor Osimhen, or of course the striking situation in general, we'll tackle those the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. Neil says, no, Jesus is not Tom. He's very similar to Nketiah, and as it looks like he will resign, we don't need to waste money on Jesus. Not quite sure what you mean, Neil. I'm assuming you're talking more regarding to against the idea of signing Gabriel Jesus, but we'll have a listen to what we've got to hear from our expert when we do have that show for you by the end of the week. Luke says, Tom, the XA is a stat you need to be looking at, as the goals scored will depend on who is shooting. Of course, but the XA is something which uses metrics and calculations around the style of how good the chances you are creating are. Is the chance that you've created being put away? Are you putting them into the right places? Is your cross good enough? Is your delivery good enough? It takes all of those things into account. So when you see players outperforming their XG, it means they're putting crosses, passes into certain areas that set up a really good opportunity to score, and that they should have a high XA. And if you're outperforming that, even better. So certainly good stuff in that sense. Iron Cub says, basically, if we get Osimhen, we have to play similarly to when we played with Aubameyang. If we get Jesus, we play similarly with Laka. Both can work. It just means the rest of the team has to slightly adjust. Disagree slightly on the Jesus part. I think Jesus is versatile, is kind of broad in terms of his characteristics enough that you don't have to play one specific way to cater to him. And again, with Osimhen, you don't have to play necessarily the same way as what we played with Aubameyang, because Osimhen does bring you that aerial threat that we didn't have when we had Aubameyang in the team. So not necessarily as rigid as you're suggesting there, but what I do think is that what we can consider from Osimhen is a player that does like to get specific chances in a specific area in terms of location, but they could be more aerial. They don't have to be along the ground like they were for Aubameyang. So there's some slight variation there. Anthony says, do you think we need a poacher or a more creative player? Due to when Ødegaard goes quiet, there's no one else that we can really depend upon for that. And it is a worry, if we have a game in which our creative midfielders, be that Ødegaard, be that Saka, aren't having the best of games, it really cuts us off from what we're capable of achieving. So Osimhen, you put him into that position. You've got players like Saka and Ødegaard. If they're having an off game, he's going to be isolated. He's going to be like Aubameyang a lot of games that he's played. He's not going to be able to create as much as maybe we would want our striker to. Gabriel Jesus, on the other hand, possibly would be very different to that, would possibly create his own chances or set up that for other players as well. So that's another kind of feather to doffed Jesus' cap, if you like. Jared says, discussion should be which is better for Arsenal, Osimhen versus Jesus. 30 million to add to the squad is a difference in their price tags. Could be in that range. Absolutely. Jesus, you're looking at around 40 to 45 million pounds. Osimhen, you're looking in the more 75 to 80 plus million range. In terms of a final judgment for me, I wouldn't go for Osimhen in the price bracket that he is. If you could get Osimhen for 50 to 60, I'd be more open to the idea of bringing him in. But the 70 to 80 plus range, I just don't think there's enough for me to say, yeah, we should sacrifice arguably another transfer target in another position to bring him in over bringing in a Jonathan David or a Jesus or someone in that kind of price packet. Because if you do go for an Osimhen over one of those players, you are most likely sacrificing another potential transfer. Is he worth it to do that? I'm not sure that he is, considering the amount of strength in depth and strength in competition and strength in the starting 11 that we need to add to the team. That's just where my head is at on him. But do let me know in the comment section what you think. And of course, down below, if you are watching on catch up, let us know if Osimhen is the player that you would like Arsenal to sign. And if you're fine with that amount of money being paid for him as well. Please make sure you drop a like on the video. It really does help us out, and subscribe to the channel if you're new, because it will continue to update you with all the more Arsenal transfer targets and the breakdowns to come. We've got some coming tomorrow and at the weekend as well. Other than that, have a fantastic day, and I'll see you again very, very soon in the morning, of course, for the next 8 a.m. show. And as always, up the Arsenal.